Today we're going to review the Assault Intercessor Datasheet, and on the way take into account the Astartes Chainsword, heavy bolt pistol changes, and the big change to overcharged plasma. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. In today's video we're going to take a look at the Assault Intercessors Datasheet from the Intromitus box, talk about Astartes Chainswords, heavy bolt pistols, new plasma rules, and then go on to have a bit of a think about how we might best employ these guys on the battlefield. So here we have the datasheet for the Assault Intercessor squad. This one is actually an example from the new 9th edition core rules book that Games Workshop released for free on their website the other day. It's part of an example, hence the random number 7 in the middle of the weapons section. Assault Intercessors are a troop's choice for Codex Space Marines, they're 5 power level, and according to new leaks rules they will be 19 points per model, including all war gear. This will put them at 1 point less than standard Intercessors in 9th edition, or 1 point more than unupgraded Primaris Reavers, with whom they share a fair few similarities. The Assault Intercessors have the exact Primaris stat line that you'd expect, literally no different from standard Intercessors. They also don't have any unique special rules all of their own, the only way that they differ is in terms of their war gear. In the background text that comes out alongside them, it says they're amongst the most widespread close support units in the chapter's arsenal, firing explosive salvos from their heavy bolt pistols as they close upon the foe. Assault Intercessors then charge into the fray by making short work of their enemies with brutal swings of their chainswords. In the squad you can take between 5 and 10 Assault Intercessors, including their Assault Intercessor Sergeant, and they're all armed with heavy bolt pistols, Astartes Chainswords, frag grenades and crack grenades. The Sergeant is exactly the same, except that if you wish you can exchange a heavy bolt pistol for a plasma pistol. Now the Astartes Chainswords have been one of the sources of speculation for a while. They hinted that they might have some sort of improvement, and that improvement is now definitely confirmed to be AP-1 over a standard chainsword. You still get the additional attack made by a chainsword, but now all of your Space Marines will be hitting at -1 in combat. It doesn't say that it's in any way unique to Primaris Marines, so I'm suspecting that this is going to be rolled out across the Space Marine Codex. Every single chainsword will probably get AP-1 now. Could certainly make them more viable, as they did seem a little bit underwhelming, and I like the change as a buff to one of Space Marine's most iconic weapons. With the extra attack plus shock assault, it means that a full squad of Assault Intercessors, 490 points, will be hitting home with a whopping 41 attacks with strength 4 AP-1, though obviously there's a decent chance they'll take casualties before you get them in combat. Still though, if you can coordinate it, then on average that'll kill around about 14 orcs on the charge, or take about 7 wounds of other Space Marines. Having that extra bit of AP really just makes them genuinely good all-rounders. There's very few infantry that they're not going to be fairly effective against. They're not useless against vehicles as well. That full unit, should you get them in range of a tank, would usually do about 4 or 5 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. And I think that's kind of important, because if you're using a slow-moving assault squad like these, then they do need to at least do some damage to whatever they make contact with, even if it's not the ideal target. I don't know whether these Astartes Chainswords will cost us, say, an additional point over something like a combat blade. I wouldn't honestly be too surprised if that's the case, just because getting AP-1 is a significant upgrade. We only have the points cost for Assault Intercessors as a whole with gear, so we don't know that yet. Interestingly enough, their heavy bolt pistols have also received a decent buff. Rather than being 12-inch range strength 4 AP-1 weapons, they're now 18-inch range. So as the Assault Intercessors advance up the board, then they're going to be snapping off a few more shots against more ideal targets, rather than having them be broadly useless most of the time. This change honestly makes them a lot more threatening and useful. If you are already within 12 inches of the enemy, then there was a reasonable chance you were going to be charging them anyway, meaning that the bolt pistol shots were sort of irrelevant. With their bigger, longer, heavier barrels, this means that their shooting will actually be kind of meaningful, even if they're nowhere near as strong as, say, a standard Intercessor. Thirdly, and interestingly, that Assault Intercessor Sergeant can only take a plasma pistol. I'm hoping that if and when these guys get a multi-part plastic kit release, they'll have additional options for the Sergeant, including things like Thunderhammers and Power Fists. If he's not able to take a decent close combat weapon, then it really is going to hamper these guys' utility compared with the standard Intercessors, who of course can shoot better, and might also be able to fight better against a bunch of targets, just purely because of that Intercessor being able to pack a Thunderhammer or something. Until then, these guys are broadly going to be left just as infantry hunters, not really much of a threat to anything like toughness 8 armor. The actual fact that the Intercessor Sergeant can take a plasma pistol is neither massively here or there for me. I'm personally not the biggest fan of plasma pistols, just because they're pretty short range and they do give you the chance of losing the entire guy, which when it's a 19-point Assault Intercessor, that's quite a big deal. But what's interesting about this is that it only explodes on an unmodified hit roll of 1 now, so even if you're blazing away against something with -1 to hit, then it's not going to give you additional chance of exploding. I really think that that's going to be a herald of things to come. New plasma rules from now on will be written like this, and I kind of hope that Games Workshop just goes the whole hog and just goes back and erratas every single plasma weapon. to work in this more intuitive way. This was a relic from the start of 8th edition that I really wasn't the biggest fan of. Just randomly, if a unit could get -1 to hit, I didn't really see why that shouldn't make the plasma weapon explode more easily, even if you do try and craft yourself some sort of explanation for it in the background. Similarly, for having units that give them +1 to hit, making them completely safe. It does mean that plasma weapons will now synergize very well with any character that allows you to just reroll ones, as that will be the main protection against them rather than getting +1 to hit rules. In any case, I'm a big fan, and I hope that they do continue to roll this out for plasma weapons in the future. In terms of their special rules, they have the standard Angels of Death for Shock Assault and Combat Doctrines, which will make these guys very dangerous indeed when they do get to the Assault Doctrine in turn 3. AP -2 Chainswords sound pretty great to me. They can combat squad, breaking down into 5 squads as per normal, though as troops I don't really see why you wouldn't just take 2 individual squads of them and then get more sergeants. I feel like combat squads are going to be used more often now, just due to those blast weapon special rules really punishing more than 5-man squads. It does look like they don't have the Intercessor keyword though. Instead they get the Assault Intercessor squad keyword rather than Intercessors, meaning that things like the Veteran Intercessor stratagem I don't think is going to work on this one. A bit of a shame really. I don't really think it's the most overpowered thing on the world, and just getting extra attacks on the same unit does have a bit of diminishing returns. Maybe in any new revisions to the Space Marine Codex they might make these guys allowable to be Veteran Intercessors as well. I think that it will be a fun little option for them. So how relevant are they going to be, and what could be some of the best ways to use them in game? At 19 points per model, they are now going to be the cheapest Primaris troops choice, 1 point ahead of Intercessors, and 2 points ahead of Incursors. It's certainly an advantage for getting more wounds of Primaris models on the table, and being troops it does mean that they're a very legitimate choice for filling out battalions. I think since the models came out, people have been theorising about putting them in impulsors, and doing a bit more of an impulsor rush style strategy, where we have a bunch of these moving all over the table, and their very good movement could allow them to get to the combat front turn 2. They will be competing with standard Intercessors and now the new Blade Guard veterans for this tactic. I think if we do get an expanded datasheet with extra options for the power swords or power fists and things, then it's going to give these guys a much better advantage and allow them to compete better. Even just as they are though, they're certainly no slouch in combat, they're just perhaps a little bit more limited into an anti-infantry type role. If they can find a way to stay alive till turn 3, then combat doctrines will be pretty great for them. A slew of AP -2 attacks is great, and this could particularly synergize well with some of the more assault orientated chapters. These guys are looking extra tasty for Blood Angels, +1 to their charge rolls makes them more reliable for getting in combat, and +1 to wound is exactly what you want for low strength weapons like these. These guys will be wounding things like Imperial Knights on 5s, or toughness 6 or 7 vehicles on 4s thanks to their Red Thirst ability. You could further combo that with a Sanguinary Priest to make them more strength 5, which would allow them to be wounding most infantry on 2s, and then even Imperial Knights and things on 4s. Never mind the other silly combos that you can get via their unique assault doctrine, getting them some extra hits, and maybe having a librarian cast Unleash Rage on them to further add to the sheer number of attacks that these guys can put out. I think White Scars are another very solid choice as well, in particular because they can advance and charge. That's really useful for slower moving infantry units like these. It just really increases the threat range of the things that they're going to be able to catch. Fallback and charge also isn't bad, and damage too when they get to their assault doctrine is really going to make them pretty solid anti-everything units. Even if they're wounding on 5s versus vehicles, AP -2 and 2 damage is really going to leave a mark. Black Templars can also get them in combat a bit easier. You can use their doctrine a little bit earlier with the Crusader Helm relic, and Chainswords have pretty much the best synergy with their doctrine, getting auto wounds on 6s. They're great with Space Wolves as well, particularly in impulsors with Ragnar Blackmane. They can make some pretty decent Blood Claw stand-ins on a more Primaris level. And even chapters like Raven Guard could potentially make good use of them as well, by being able to deep strike with their Infiltrate stratagem. Deathwatch have also been rumoured to be getting an update fairly early in 9th edition, so having them being able to combo with them could be another way of getting them a deep strike. So as for whether or not they're going to be used, they are going to need to be better than their competitors within the Space Marine Codex. In general, for the more ranged chapters, I think that standard Intercessors are still probably going to be the way to go. Being able to blaze away with bolt rifles from long range every single turn is a really decent advantage. I think that now Incursors are only 1 point more than Intercessors, they may also compete for the same role. They're not going to be quite as good as these guys, with only their paired combat blades for a combat advantage, rather than extra attacks and AP -1. But the way that you could have them charging the enemy right from turn 1 is really quite a big deal if you are trying to go down a melee sort of strategy. You definitely need to consider the other elites type choices that could be competing for them. Things like Aggressors will kill infantry in close combat, but they'll also punch straight through tanks and vehicles while shooting incredibly well. So if you're looking for a more foot-slogging unit, they might still be the way to go. Blade Guard veterans are almost twice as expensive as these guys, but very survivable against high AP weapons with those storm shields, and of course strength 5 power swords will go through pretty much everything. For chainsword wielders, we've got Vanguard veterans, and also these guys aren't too dissimilar from the Reavers in the elite slot. It appears that unupgraded Reavers are 18 points in the new edition, so they could potentially be worth it, so they could be another potential competitor, particularly as you can buy them at Deep Strike. Overall though, I think that these will be used. I don't think that they're necessarily stronger than the rest of the Primaris troop choices, but more options is rarely a bad thing. I think certainly for certain armies, particularly the melee focused ones, these may well become the new battle line unit. Let me know what you think of them down in the comments below, and if you've been enjoying these analyses then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics for regular 40k content coming every day. If you have been enjoying all the videos, I'd just like to mention that the channel does have a Patreon page, which you can find in the video description. Making all of these videos does take a fair amount of time, so if you're enjoying fairly regularly, then any support is really appreciated. Channel patrons also get a fair few other benefits, such as seeing videos early, regular entry to prize draws, where we'll be giving away 3 copies of the Indomitors box at the end of the month, and they get to vote on what sort of things come next for the channel in the next videos. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help keep these videos coming, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.